Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we are talking about grief, and this will be done in two parts where we talk about some elements today and we talk about some elements in the next video. And so to start us off, I just want to share a brief bit about my experience with grief to give us a background, and to demonstrate how I myself have dealt with grief in the past and even up till now. And my first experience with grief was at about 18 or 19 years when my aunt passed away. She was only 30 years old, and I was in university at the time, so I came home, attended the funeral, and went back to my busy life. So that busyness did help me to treat with the grief at that time. Fast forward to some years later, I lost my maternal grandmother and my grandfather as well, just about a year apart. I had to treat with that grief. However, that was a bit easier because they died in their 80s. There was a sense of, as much as it was hurtful and you were hurting, they had lived their full lives. And so they would not still be here on earth, suffering from different ailments and having to go through medical treatment and all of that. They were safe in the arms of the Lord. I would have lost my uncle as well a few years ago. There have been another incident where I had to treat with grief. But the one incident I want to speak specifically to was the loss of a dear friend of mine. I lost this friend 2 years ago in 2018. We grew up together. So we grew up almost like sisters, very close, from childhood days through teenage to adulthood, and we were very, very close for many years. Of course, we would have had little arguments and so on in between, but generally speaking, we remained very close friends for many years. And she passed away in 2018, and I had no idea. As I said, I had dealt with grief before, but this was different. I had no idea of how I would react and what would happen in the aftermath. She was buried, of course, I cried at the funeral and all of that. 6 months after the funeral, she passed away in June of that year. 6 months later, on the 31st of August, I remember we usually give our testimony, of how the year had been for us and so on at church. And so I was there giving my testimony. And when I mentioned that, I started bawling. I'm not saying crying. It was not a gentle cry. It was not a tears rolling down. It was a bawl out loud. For those of you who know what it means to bawl, to cry very loudly in front of the entire church. And I can tell you, I had no idea where that came from. I thought I was dealing with it. I thought my grief was controlled. I thought I was relatively okay because I was functioning, doing my daily stuff, going to work and so on. But that just erupted from me. And after that, I could not look at a picture of her face. I had pictures, I still have the pictures on my phone. And when I scrolled through my phone, I could not look at the pictures. So the grief was still there, just under the surface, but there. Fast forward to about 2 years later in 2020, she passed in 2018. And I was looking at a movie, that dealt with the abduction and death of a young girl. And again, this was 2 years later, those feelings just erupted. Those feelings of loss, of deep loss. And again, I started to cry. I cried. And this was 2 years after. So I wanted to share this to say to you, whoever is looking at this, be easy on yourself. Grief is something that you cannot tell how it would affect you. And even as a therapist, even going to school and learning about the stages of grief and so on, I can tell you, when it comes to dealing with the reality of those feelings, sometimes you can never tell how you would react or what would be your situation. And so I just want to encourage you by looking at this today. Now, to define grief, what is grief? For those of us who are not too sure, grief is essentially an emotional response to loss. we treat with it typically in terms of bereavement, in terms of someone passing, but it can refer to any type of loss. Sometimes we grieve for other losses in our lives, especially the fact that we've had a quite challenging past year with what's happening in the entire world. There are many of us who are also grieving as a result of this, and just the sense of a loss of normalcy, a loss of jobs in many instances, a loss of that sense of security, in that, we have to wear masks and we have to ensure we sanitize and so on. There is a sense of loss among many persons, and so grief results from that as well. And so in treating with this, what we're going to look at would deal primarily with bereavement, but can also work for any other form of grief in response to any other loss. And in having given that story as well, what I want to point out to us is that the nature of your grief would depend on the nature of the relationship you had with the person, how important the person was to you, the situation, all right, in terms of what exactly you would have lost, and so on. And so the world and society likes to tell us that we should grieve in a specific way for a specific thing, and your level of grief should be commensurate and line up in this particular way because of this, and so on. And so I just wanted to demonstrate to you that your grief is your grief, right? Your grief is your grief. You would know the nature of the relationship you had with that individual. You would know what you would have lost, and so your grief would be in respect to that. So let's look at some tips in treating with grief. I must say, as we get into this, that there are no surefire answers, and we just want to explore some possibilities. These are things I would have used myself, and also what I would have learned, in training as a therapist. Some may work for you, some may not, but it's not a one-size-fits-all situation again. So depending on your perspective, you may be able to use some of them. So let's get into that. How do we deal with grief? Firstly, I want you to know it's okay to cry. Men, even the men, it's okay to cry. It's okay. Don't let anyone make you feel that you're crying too much, or you're crying too long, or you're not crying enough. Right? Again, we have so many demands placed on us. It is okay to cry. If you want, like me, you want to bawl a bit, you want to scream, you want to punch a punching bag, your reaction again is based on your situation. Do not feel as if you have to experience grief like someone else. Go through it. Go through your grief. Whatever reaction that you feel you need to get the emotions out, you go ahead. You do that. Another thing that we like to do is, quite often, is when persons are grieving, we like to label it as depression. And depression is a word that we throw out quite often. If you need to shut away for a while, then it's okay to shut away for a while. How do we determine that your actions can become dangerous to you? Would be the extent of time that you take, in the initial stage to process through things. And let me explain what I mean by that. If you've lost someone very close to you and you shut away for a week, that is perfectly okay. That is perfectly fine. You shut away for 2 weeks, that can still work. If you shut away for 3 months and you are not going to your job and you are losing income and you're not able to pay your bills and so on, then situation has become what we call maladaptive, which essentially means that it's bad for you and you're not able to function in the society that you need to function in. And so, this is when we would advise you to seek help. But usually persons, are able to manage this aspect of it and be able to grieve safely and then be able to go to your job, be productive, do what you need to do. All right. So I want to give you that assurance, firstly, that it is okay to experience the emotions you are experiencing. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel sad. And do not feel that you need to be shut into a box in terms of how you need to experience your grief. Okay? Another thing that is okay to do and that you should seek to do in dealing with your grief is to talk about it. Quite often, we feel that people are tired of hearing us talking about it, and so we don't want to talk about it. Quite often, this is what we say to ourselves. But if you think even in circumstances where others have been going through grief and you're the bystander, sometimes you just don't know what to say. All right, and so persons looking on would definitely be willing to listen. So please do not tell yourself that persons don't want to hear, and reach out, open up, speak about your feelings, talk about it as much as you need to, and that's important. And so I want to assure you that in dealing with your grief, it's okay to do that. Another thing that helps is to give yourself a daily routine, to set up a daily routine, because it helps to force yourself to get out of bed at a set time in the morning, to get up and do your chores, to accomplish tasks. If you set specific tasks that you want to accomplish and you're able to do those, it gives you a sense of, normalcy, for want of a better word, and so you're able to get into that move, and you're able to start processing and not only remaining in those feelings, but being able to start to actively engage and be a part of the society around you again. Another thing that you can do to help you deal with your grief is to set goals and achieve those goals. And you're saying, in grief? Yes. Another thing you can do is set goals and achieve those goals, because that helps to give you a sense of purpose. Quite often, based on what might have happened, we tend to feel, why are we still here? Why were we not the one that was taken? Why are we still here? And so we have to understand that we still have purpose. And so we have to understand that God still has us here for a reason. As hard as it might be to hear or to think of that at the point in time, He still has us here for a reason. And so one thing I did when my friend passed, and I was still heavily in grief, I actually wrote 2 books. Short reads, but I wrote 2 books. Because at that point I said to myself, if I am still here, she's gone, what excuse do I have? What excuse do I have to not fulfill my purpose and I'm still here? What excuse do I have for still delaying what I would have wanted to do for many years? And I just kept making excuses and took it for granted that I would be here for long again. And that woke me up to realize not just that our time is not sure, unfortunately, that's the reality of it. We are never sure how much time we have on this earth, but also in many instances we are aware of the purpose, or we're becoming aware of the purpose that God has set before us, but yet we are not walking in it because of fear, and sometimes because of excuses and so many other reasons. We're not walking in it. And so I use that to drive me and to motivate me in saying to myself, I'm still here. And if I'm here, I had better accomplish what God wants me to accomplish on the face of this earth, because my time is not guaranteed. So you can use that as a motivating factor. Also, especially if it's projects and so on that your dear departed loved one would have loved, would have appreciated, it can serve as a sense of, memorial to them, a way of remembering them, is my 4th tip in terms of dealing with grief. And so we will leave it here for now. So these were 4 of the main points in dealing with grief. So I hope that this would help you in some way, and we will continue in part 2 with the remaining points. So thank you for watching. Thank you again. If you have subscribed, thank you for subscribing. And please do come again for more information as we keep discussing these issues as we grow intentionally together. God bless. Bye.